So yeah, hello everyone. Thank you, Patrick, for the great introduction to Polkadot, how it works, because that it really does reduces a lot of work from my side now, since I don't have to explain everything. And as you guys can know, I am by the looks of my desktop environment, I am a developer. Yes, I'm probably one of the nerdiest guys in this room. Let me just give you a quick introduction to myself and this presentation. So, yep. Hello everyone, my name is Hoon Kim. I am the CTO of Astar Network, and I'm here to present to you not really about Astar Network, but about the entire blockchain, Web3. What's the problem with it? Why is it so hot right now? Where do you want to go? And what the future stores for us. So for this presentation, I'm gonna assume that people here heard about blockchain, but they have no idea what blockchain is. They have mixed opinions about it, but still, because it's such a hot topic, it's hard to ignore what blockchain is. So you're here to see like what blockchain can really provide. So that's my assumption here. Okay, so first, what is blockchain technology? And by the way, like I spend like half a day just making this slide, so it's design is not the best. Like I spend more time thinking of the content. So just listen to me instead of looking at the slides. Although the slides are going to be important. So first, I'm going to give you a very generic example of what a blockchain technology is, or like what's the more generic dumbed down version of blockchain, or what does it serve? What purpose does it serve? And let me just first put this out there. It's impossible to summarize blockchain into a single word, because that's like trying to say what is the internet. And now internet is such a big thing that it's impossible to summarize internet, and that's where blockchain is going. It's essentially the next generation of the internet. So I cannot ever give you a good example of what what blockchain is, but I can give you an opinionated version of what the technology can do in a very generic way, which is in a traditional way, when organizations have to communicate or make a transaction with each other, they have to go through a trusted third party. And this is not just in a real life business case, but also in technology as well. Every system requires a trusted third party in order to guarantee a certain transaction to happen. In real life examples, you can think about banks or even sending a mail, like sending a message to another person. You have to go through a centralized, some sort of black box that guarantees the delivery of something. I mean, this is like a very generic example that if you search about blockchains, the blockchain removes the middleman and all that. Like, what does that mean though, right? It's not just about removing the middleman. In fact, the blockchain will not really remove it or replace the middleman. It'll just make the work much easier and gives more options. So what does the blockchain do? Not removing the middleman, but it provides another approach to the whole trust layer. And here, what does trust layer mean? Trust layer refers to this communication layer where you have to go through a trusted third party. So in this case, imagine if you have to, if you're an insurance company and you have to communicate with a hospital or vice versa, it has to go through a certain message protocol, either in a technical sense or in an actual real life sense, where they have to go through a third party company who's dedicated to communicating with the hospitals and under programs. So this blockchain just provides another alternative to this. And why is blockchain like so important, or what opportunity can you have using blockchain? So blockchain itself is a collection of networks. You can say it's really hard to say without throwing in a lot of technical lingos. So I'm gonna struggle a little bit trying to find the good term for this, but basically, imagine traditionally when you're logging in, do you guys use Google to log in to a service, right? I assume like at least half of you here has logged in with Google for a certain service. And let's imagine this login system in a perspective of a startup or a business. So as a startup, I want to create a login system. I need to have a database. I have to make the database secure. And I also need to attract users to provide their personal information like email and phone number and name to my database. And it's like completely, you're basically trusting those guys to register their information to your database. And this actually increases the barrier to entry for a lot of people, because if I have to log into a new service, I know like the service might be something great, but I don't want to spend the time like making a password and like writing my email, confirming my email, and all that stuff. Google abstracts that so easily with their OAuth or logging in with Google function. So anyone who has a Google account is usually a potential customer for a startup, and that's like bootstraps your product so much. Like it reduces the barrier to entry, and for you, you have no burden of securing user information because that burden goes to Google. Google is the trusted third party in this case, and they're the one that handles everything. Like they are the one that provides authenticity, saying like, yes, this user is correct. They comply with our security standards and they can log in. This user is the owner of this Google account and all that. But in blockchain, you can actually remove this layer of Google layer, I would say, and just directly allow people to connect with an application and still maintain access to whatever information that the account might have with other account informations like that happen within the blockchain. So it's essentially a database of rich information, and for startups, you can easily bootstrap your application. So a little bit more concrete example here. So let's say you have a startup and your customer base relies on the customers interacting with a certain token, a very specific cryptocurrency. Then with traditional services, it's quite challenging because you have to ask them so many different information to actually get those stuff. But in blockchain world, it's very easy because everything is stored in the blockchain. So user logs in, you get all the information of what their transaction was, and you can bootstrap that, and then perform airdrops or perform targeted services or whatever. And of course, there are blockchains that are exactly designed to counteract privacy issues where everything is so transparent that people might be uncomfortable with it. So there are a lot of options. And for startups, this is quite powerful if you use it very well, because it's so easy to now provide services to people who are actively using a certain service. And you do not require a third party to get all the information of this. Everything is on the blockchain directly. So this is great. Another great thing is you can actually share user bases. So if one account is a active community member of a certain blockchain, and they want to also participate in a different community, and in Polkadot we have a shared account scheme, so it's easy to understand what their user activity is, and you can actually put that as a hard requirement. If you want to be part of our community member or part of our application, you have to have a certain amount of activity within another network or something like that, just to prove that if that person is definitely someone who has experience within this space. And in blockchain space, like finding someone with an experience is really challenging, especially the right experience. So this is something that a lot of services are using as well. Yep. And of course, reduce maintenance costs as well, because you don't have to store everything on your personal database, and you don't have the burden of security because it's on the blockchain. And an alternative funding mechanism like ICOs or on-chain crowdfunding, where you don't have to rely on GoFundMe or Kickstarter to make sure that they don't change their policies or how their fees work. Yeah. So what about established companies then? So for startups, we see that it's good for bootstrapping, but for established companies where they don't care too much about the token prices, or as in like they don't care too much going into all full degen into DeFi world, they just want to try it out. They want to use the blockchain technology a little bit, but what's the main advantage for this? Well, this is my personal opinion, but the way how I see it. So blockchain could be treated as a inter-organizational communication channel. It's a standard that it has no bias. You can submit any information in there, and any information in there that you know is issued by someone who verifies their identity as a certain company, then you know that it is from that company. So in simple terms, very simple terms, imagine like what blockchain could do with insurance companies, and how if a client wants to move from one insurance company to another or vice versa, like it simplifies the process so much. Or even let's look into supply chain management, which I think is a hot topic for blockchains. It was, and I think it still kind of is to an extent. Let's say if I'm a car manufacturer and I want all of my parts, my outsourced companies to give me a certificate of how much carbon emission output was in producing this part. And the problem is, in traditional company, if you want to enforce that to your sourcing companies, they have to comply with whatever standard that you come up with. You have to be the one who provide all the infrastructure. And unless the government comes in with like a very very standardized format of how this information is recorded and distributed, it's going to be impossible for us to have any communication. And those sourcing companies have to create the same, like recreate the same system for every client that they have. And that is a nightmare for them. So with blockchain, you can have a common ground of communication saying that, yes, this company who is not related to this company, but they happen to produce the parts for this their product, they can provide the information on chain. And for the manufacturers, they just have to read that and say like, okay, yeah, this address did originate from the owner of this company, and we agreed that this is where we want to read. So I get that this information is correct. So it removes so many headaches from intercorporate communications. And of course, another big thing I think Web3 brings is, for the first time ever, transparency is a competitive advantage. So traditionally, every companies were very protective of their stuff for obvious reasons, because you can get Intel corporate information is very valuable. It gets stolen every time. But for users, transparency is kind of a tricky subject, because they want transparency in what the corporations are doing in order to really trust that I'm okay with having certain information provided to them, or I want to know what they're doing with their information. Well, blockchain, it's not going to solve transparency. It's not going to solve like all that issue, because we're all humans and we always love to make more problems as we solve. But it can definitely provide this new way of thinking where actually my company is transparent, therefore it's better than the other companies, and people could come to your service because they know that you're not bullshitting. And in the blockchain space, this is actually kind of true. Like if you see a blockchain that's closed source, they don't know the team, they don't know any on-chain reserves. People are really scared of what they're doing, so they are not keen on using their services. And this is like what I like to call transparency as a competitive advantage. And I think this is something that's very interesting, that's sort of under-tapped, but I see a lot of potential in there. And what I want to let people know is that blockchain shouldn't be treated as like its own product, own application or anything, or just a decentralized database. But if you put in the account of like token economics, community members, on-chain activity, and on-chain use cases that are actually deployed on your network, the way how you should see blockchain is not just like an AWS, but an actual nation, a digital nation. We are, as a sovereign blockchain, Astar Network, we have our own community members, we have our own currency, we have our own merchants, like smart contracts basically, or applications, and they all interact with each other. So we have so now blockchains can open this era of digital nations. That's great, but what's the problem here? Well, nothing is perfect, and blockchain, by God, is like so many problems there. It's a nightmare, but that's why I'm never out of business, thankfully. So the biggest problem with blockchain, I think, or the reason why we all have this like mixed perception of blockchain technology, even though as a technology it's amazing, is because there's a huge civil war going on in the community. There's the people who look at blockchain as a technology, and my example that I gave you before is really like looking at blockchain in a technical sense, because that's like probably the most unbiased way of looking at things, but definitely not the whole picture. So what the example I gave you is definitely just service level. Just wanted to let you guys know that. Another problem is, well, not problem, but like another faction is the Web3 movement, as in people who look at blockchain as or the entire blockchain industry as like a Web3 as a movement. We should be transparent, verifiable, and we don't need corporations, fuck government, whatever. That's Web3 as a movement. And don't get me wrong, like I hate government as much as the next guy. But when I get fucked, I want someone to actually insure me. So, we hate the government until we get in trouble. And that's where the problem comes in. Like everyone thinks like everything on chain is gold. It's God. But that's not the case. And there's also another faction, which is the crypto bros, or the moon bros, as I like to call them. The people who look at cryptocurrency as the future of currency, people who look at DeFi as like everything, like you have to go to the moon and invest in products because it's gonna appreciate at some point. Buy and trade NFTs because you're gonna get rich for that. Financial independence, right? These three guys are constantly fighting with each other, and this is why we always have like this different like mixed perception. Imagine if I was a big company, would I feel welcomed if I'm in this space? Like, I want to look at blockchain as a technology, but a lot of people are telling me that if you don't have a token, like why should I trust you or all that shit? And I'm like, okay, like then should we look into DeFi then? And then they look into DeFi and they're like, oh yeah, but you're a corporation. Like, no, we don't want corporations. The internet is free, you know. So the Web3 guys are there like, okay, so should we look into like transparency and all that? And then the circle continues. Like, it's just horrible. And like all three factions have a very valid point. Don't get me wrong. Like, cryptocurrency as a new generation of currency, I guess in a way, like how the technology enables it, yes, definitely there's a lot of potential in there. As a method of bootstrapping a project, alternative funding mechanism, yes, amazing. Web3 movement, yeah, like transparency, decentralization, definitely something that we need. But it's not a binary thing, and blockchain is not binary because we use hexadecimals to encode everything. You don't have to have one thing to lose the other. You can have it in a spectrum. And blockchain technology is where like things are a little bit shafted. Like everyone's like, oh, I mean those eggheads, like what are they doing? It's like AI, machine learning. We talk about machine learning, it's kind of the big thing, but we're using it to generate art and like really funny images on Dolly. Like it's not. We have a lot of practical examples for sure, a lot of great use cases, and there's a lot of potential in there. But the way how technology is conceived versus how it's perceived is always different throughout history, and blockchain is no exception here. So, just want to like demystify this and how everyone sees blockchain technology. Another problem is that blockchains are silos here because every blockchain is kind of isolated from each other. You have one blockchain, and it's hard to communicate with another blockchain unless you use bridges. But bridges are a trusted third party, essentially. And I thought the whole reason why we do blockchain is because we want to remove those third parties, right? But why do we have that? And it's hard to remove them because the value of communicating between different blockchains is so big. And what does it mean to communicate with different blockchains? Well, the way how I like to say it is like it's kind of like trading between different nations. You can become your own nation. You can always like have your own like great economy and your merchants, but still, you can't make the best out of your economy if you don't trade with others, and they can maximize in certain things. And with blockchains, this is the same as well. Like you can have your own native currency, and everyone pays gas fees on that currency, but if you cannot communicate with other blockchains and their liquidity, then whatever you have in your network is just going to be isolated. And this is a huge problem right now not because people are against isolation. I mean, okay, I know people are actually against bridging and all that because, especially Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, he's like, oh, we've got to maximize the blockchain because why do we want to specialize it if it's not verifiable within your chain, which makes sense. But verification is not the entire picture, right? So now I explained you the problem issue here and what blockchain is. So I'll go into like what is Astar Network, and I'll try to make this a little bit brief because I want to go deeper into Polkadot since that's why we're here and it's in the name of the meetup, right? So Astar Network. Well, first, this is our ethos basically. We believe in a future where creators and innovators are free to express themselves, and the value of the project should be determined by the users, not based on the token price. So based on this, I think you can sort of get a couple of hints here. Astar Network, we are a layer 1 smart contract platform. And smart contract is essentially a piece of application on top of a blockchain. So we are a programmable blockchain. You can add your own logic, you can make your own use cases, whatever you want. As a blockchain, we just provide the environment for them to develop. And our main goal is to remove the language barrier, because when it comes to smart contracts or blockchain development in general, I think most of you who looked into blockchain development might have known like everything is Solidity and EVM, and you have to learn a new language from scratch. It's a language that's specifically made for smart contracts, so it makes sense. But when it comes to user bases, and especially creating complex use cases, trying to learn a new language, forcing people to learn a new language and making them translate whatever we have in the real world into the blockchain has its limits. So we use WebAssembly as our backend for a blockchain execution environment. And thanks to this, any language that can compile down into WebAssembly is essentially usable to build your own smart contracts. So this includes Rust and assembly script. Those two are the officially supported ones, but in theory, it is possible to create smart contract with C++, Go, assembly script is a derivative of TypeScript, which is derivative of JavaScript, so indirectly JavaScript, and so many different use cases. It expands the capabilities of developers and increases developer pools to come into this space. Finally, what we really want to do, well, we have a unique module function called dApp staking, and what does this do? It's like a decentralized Patreon, or I guess you could say a direct funding mechanism for smart contracts. In Astar Network, you can deploy a smart contract, and the users can stake or support your application directly. And based on chain inflation, the rewards will go to the developer. So in other words, developers are able to receive passive income from the network based on how much support they receive from the users. And users have to lock a certain amount of token to voice the degree of support that they give to the developers, basically. And it's a way to incentivize developers to create something that's actually people want to use, and not some other like DeFi or a token that goes to the moon bullshit. Just pure functionality, pure, just indie artistic value. Like that's what we are built on top of. And yeah, so these are some key facts. That we are a layer 1 blockchain, application platform, an innovation hub, and incentivization, as I mentioned before. And this is some of the products that we make, multi-VM, so we support WebAssembly, EVM as well. So existing dApp ecosystem can still build on top of us. And we allow interoperability between WASM and EVM, which EVM is like the Ethereum version of smart contracts. WASM is our custom version. dApp staking in the Swanky suite, which is the developer tool for building smart contracts. And here's our ecosystem. I think this is quite outdated, actually. Our network is growing. I would say, I don't want to say it here. I mean, this is not streamed, right? So I guess I could say it. Yeah. I mean, excluding Moonbeam, probably we are like one of the biggest blockchains in Polkadot. Yeah. So I have to put that there, yeah. So yeah, let's go to the main show then. What is Polkadot, right? I've talked about interoperability, the problems with blockchains. We're all silos, isolated. We all want to create something, right? So Polkadot is a layer 0 blockchain, and I think Patrick did a great job at explaining, like with this great art. So I don't have to explain too much, but just basically, what does Polkadot allow? Because Polkadot is a blockchain for other blockchains. Polkadot only facilitates this environment where blockchains can communicate with each other, and blockchains that are connected to Polkadot are referred to as parachains. And in a technical term, we are a shard of Polkadot. So all parachains are shards, and Polkadot is the one that provides the validators for the blockchains, so that blockchains always have an uptime and the blocks get validated in a decentralized manner. So as parachains, we do not have to supply our own validators at all, which means our token economics change a lot. The whole issue of decentralization and uptime is also handled by Polkadot, which is amazing. That's why we're able to create the dApp staking mechanism, because if we had validators, like the reward pool would be very small, because we have to incentivize the validators to keep the network up. But for us, we don't have that. We don't have that limitation. And another great thing about the interoperable nature of Polkadot is that because they can all communicate with each other, they are incentivized to maximize and focus on a certain use case or a certain industry. So traditionally, blockchains were very isolated and maximalist, meaning that every use case should be on a single blockchain. They're very monolithic. If you look at Ethereum, it's not really focusing on any industry because it's a general purpose smart contract platform, which, I mean, it's the first of its kind, so of course. But even now, if you look at new blockchains that comes up, all smart contract platforms, they're all focusing on like either DeFi or just like everything, whatever Ethereum does. Ethereum does, but cheaper and faster. Like, that's it. But with parachain, with Polkadot, parachains can focus on a specific industry and still be able to sustain themselves because they know that another industry who actually might use our use case they have a sufficient liquidity and they are a parachain, so which means they can communicate with each other. And this method of communication is called XCMP, or cross consensus message passing. The XCMP is the protocol. XCM is the message itself. Like XCM is like a message format for blockchains to communicate with each other, but technical details there. And what's the interesting part about this? So the way how I express like the future blockchains. Let's go into the future blockchains. Actually, do I have a next slide? Yeah. Okay. So the way how I say it, layer 1 blockchains are like its own nation, as I mentioned before, and smart contracts are the merchants, individual shops, that's on a blockchain. And of course, shops can trade with each other, communicate, B2B, all that. But how can you do that in an international level? Well, layer 0, Polkadot, is the first case where it allows that. It allows us to have a native trustless communication method between different nations. So you can think of Polkadot as more like a federation or an FDA, a trade agreement between blockchains. Actually, I think did I say FTA? FTA. The fuck is wrong with me? Yeah. Yeah, it's FTA. No, I think I just made a mistake there. But anyway, you guys know what I mean. It's an agreement between blockchains. It's like a collection. It's like an EU of blockchains. And you can say Astar is like Germany. We don't. Germany is a sovereign nation, so of course, like we want to be referred to as Germany. But people can still call us Polkadot, and we still understand what they're saying. Like you can call people living in Europe as European, and it still makes sense grammatically speaking. But it could go deeper, and that's sort of the role with the relationship between Polkadot and Astar as a parachain. So yes, thank you so much for my very long presentation. Took longer than I expected, but hope it was great. Any questions?
Yeah. How do you incentivize? You mentioned you're incentivizing developers.
Yes.
But like, how do you do that? Like, which developers? The ones that are building on Astar?
Yep. So yes, essentially of course, like you have to build an Astar. The way how the dApp staking mechanism works is users can choose Actually, I can give you like a live demo right now. Like, why not? Yeah, portal.astar. So this is our Astar portal. It's our front end. And sort of portal to interact anything that's on chain. And you can see here in my poor ass, let's see. Yeah, let me just use my main account here. So what does this do? dApp staking here. So we have a list of dApps that are whitelisted. So not every contract will be available like for staking because of scalability reasons. Instead, they can go through just a listing process that is managed by the community. Right now, for Astar, it's managed by us. We just check if the dApp is legit and all that. And if they're all good, it's not too hard. It's just like a bunch of checklists. And if they're all good, then we list them here. But ultimately, we want to leave this to the community so the community can decide which dApp makes more sense to be incentivized or not. And here, you can just choose an app. You can click the app. You can use it if you want. Not a lot of descriptions here, but
This would be a potential developer who I can support. This lady.
Good question. I don't know. I mean, it's a Star Swap. I don't.
It's a project.
Yeah, it's a project. It's a project. Yeah. I mean, it could be the team. Like, it doesn't matter. The video is like they can upload whatever video they want, but it could be. Yeah, absolutely. And you can use the app directly, see if you like it. If you like it and you want to see the project going further, and you love the developers behind it, you just go stake, and you stake whatever token you want to stake on them. And based on the amount that was staked, every chain era, they will be allocated a reward directly to the team's account. Yep.
And is there something like a review?
So
Is it easier for me to choose?
I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's actually our scope with dApp staking V2. So this is just the like a prototype essentially. I mean, it's like far more work than prototypes, but in V2 we are planning on adding like more on-chain metrics to see like how many user activity this dApp has, how many review this dApp has. Reviewing is a little bit challenging right now because we don't want to have like so many messages, and we want to keep the portal more decentralized, so not too opinionated. So that might be, we might just link it to like their project page on our forums, which you can have comments. But we want to put all information into a single interface. So just look at a dApp and you're like, oh damn, like the review is really good, but the user activity is really shit. So what does that mean? Or you can also look at their TVLs or their token gas consumption, which is like how much transaction was calling your contract, and all that stuff. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not sure if I understand exactly, it's a bit late, but basically it seems like it's a Kickstarter for digital app or decentralized apps.
It's more like Patreon than Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is when you are, do you know Patreon? Okay. So Patreon is application, it's like a platform for creators where if you love a good YouTuber, but the YouTuber cannot sustain themselves through ads, then you can just like, send, fund them directly every month. It's kind of like that. But for dApps and for projects.
And is there a risk for the team or the individual who is showcasing stuff or herself there? Is there a way to penalize them in case you don't deliver?
Oh, well, not deliver. That's so the first and I guess simplest way is to basically let the market decide. As in, like, if a supporter has a better alternative that they want to support, then they'll just stake out of it and move their staking to another project. That's one way, but we do want to have a bit more direct, effective way of penalizing. And it's not, that's a problem right now, because the way how we do it currently is through like on-chain governance. Basically, anyone can make a proposal saying like, this dApp is malicious, it's a spam or whatever, and we can delist them. There is no slashing mechanism, but can we make this decentralized? A little bit challenging, because it's impossible for you cannot have on-chain statistics for something that's very human, right? So right now, I think that's the best option we can have, but we're always looking into different ways and improving ourselves for this.
So you mentioned that like at some point the community will be able to pick the projects that they will be listed.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna use like a DAO or?
Yes. Well, essentially, I mean, we have on-chain governance, and that's how it's going to happen. So every call will be done through the governance democracy palette, and everyone can see like what is going to be approved like a week before it's actually executed, and everyone has a right to like rebut that proposal.
Cool. So you talked about writing dApps or smart contracts in WebAssembly, or
yes.
deploying in WebAssembly.
Yeah.
So this is something which is enabled by your parachain, or this is something which works by default on Polkadot?
It's I mean, okay, if we go into like a very technical sense, then everything is in WebAssembly and Polkadot because it's substrate. But if we're talking about strictly smart contracts, smart contract binary, then yes, it's only enabled by us because we are explicitly implemented the contract palette, which accepts WASM binary as a contract.
Okay.
So yeah, that's, although it's like anyone can add that module really. Yeah. So it's not really us special, but what's special is that we have a link between EVM and WASM.
Okay. And then you said like you have all these parachains or blockchain of blockchains. So
yeah.
Did I get this right? If I write my dApp in TypeScript, I compile it to WebAssembly, I deploy it on your chain.
Yep, on our chain.
And then it's also available on Ethereum?
Not, okay, so on parachains, within parachains, are you talking about Ethereum, the network, or the contract execution environment?
The network. The
network. So no, it will not be available there because that's not a parachain. And we will have a bridge, like a light client bridge called Snow Bridge, that's going to be on Polkadot as a parachain. So that does allow you to access it. But cross-environment contract call is still very tricky, so no, it will not be available right away. And even if there's going to be a lot of hacky approaches to it.
Because I mean, the code needs to be transpiled then, right? To Solidity then, if it.
Well, it'll be EVM bytecode, but no, it's not going to be transpiled. We don't do that, and that's not advisable at all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Is like you have to be secure, just your environment, optimized for your environment, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the most used app on Astar?
Used app on Astar. So I believe right now the biggest one by market cap is RSwap, which is like a DEX, a traditional DEX, but their pools are pretty big. Yeah, it's mostly DeFi at the moment because that's where most people were interested in. Yeah, I think RSwap. Here you go. Although the internet is a little bit slow here, so I can't show you the exact amount they've received. But here you go. This is RSwap. It's like Uniswap basically, but on Astar.
So I think most of the hacks they happen on bridges, right? So
yeah.
Can you kind of go into the bridges, like what is like the main point of failure or something like that?
So as I said, bridges are a trusted third party essentially. You have to have your own server or whatever, and how bridges work is they deploy a bridge contract on two different blockchains, and they perform a mint and burn action within the contract level. And then they get that information of like how much was burnt or locked from this home chain, and then they mint that back into the other chain. But everything is like very centralized. There are ways to decentralize this a little bit. Like I think Chainlink and I mean most like competent bridges should have set of validators. But in the end, who has the right to mint and burn? That's the real question, and it always ends up in like multi-sig wallets. So the security of that bridge relies on, well, first network availability, but also the owner of the multi-sigs. And Polkadot has a different approach because it has an embedded light client for all parachains, so it's always verifiable. It's always on chain, and the validators are the one that actually validates any transaction that happens within their own blockchain. So it has a very different security model from traditional bridges. Yeah, and biggest problem is bridges. They're trusted third parties, but they are not trusted at all. As in, like, the team is like very secretive, and if it was like I don't know, if it was like a government funded, like well-funded companies operating those, then maybe it's like more secure. Like, imagine Google having their own bridge, like that would be really secure, right? But it's like a bunch of people who just learn programming coming in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.